Has Biya been threatened by Ngoh according to Mr. Captain Effoudou outing? We are questioning ourselves whether it is a spy confession or a clan war between Ngoh Ngoh and Baboki. And so, my dear good people of the diaspora, good people of our homeland, it is Cyrille le Maire who is back again to share with you what is on the lips of almost all Cameroonians, locally and in the diaspora. We are not talking about Samuel Eto'o and football, nor are we talking about Camto and his multiple faces. Neither are we talking about Chiruma. We are talking about guns, real ones, found a few hundred meters from a sitting head of state resident, carried by a man nobody in Cameroon army can account for. We are talking about a captain who vanished for 3 years and come back speaking like Jesus, who has nothing left to lose. And we are equally talking about the second most powerful man in Yaoundé, a man who has sat at the right hand of power for 15 years, now named on camera as someone who wanted President Biya dead. This one takes time to unpack properly, and we will not insult your intelligence by rushing it. Who is the captain who is talking? Who is Captain Effoudou? Let's start with the man himself, because half of the confusion online comes from people who don't know his rank from his resume. Donald Effoudou is not a random social media agitator. He came from the 35th class of the Inter-Army Military School, the pipeline that produces Cameroon officer elite, commissioned in 2017. By the time he was 29, he was running intelligence inside the presidency at his military cabinet. That is not a small file. That is one of at least 5 or 6 parallel intelligence structures feeding the presidency alongside the Directorate General of External Relations, the DGSN, the National Security Council, and the Presidential Security itself. He was dismissed from the army on March the 13th, 2024, officially for desertion in peacetime. Unofficially, his own account linked his fall to report his unit filed in 2023 a report about armed, unregistered individuals operating dangerously close to the presidential residence. That report is where this entire story begins. The man with the gun. Who is he? Here is where it gets strange, and I want you to follow the thread carefully. The photos unit says they flagged a man carrying high-grade weapons, not in army inventory, posing as a battalion commander. Investigation allegedly traced him to former French Foreign Legion sergeant with service in Iraq and Afghanistan. His name, Mohamadou Sani. Now, there are two versions of this man, and they do not match one another. Version 1 presents him as a man arrested near the presidency carrying forged documents, including a weapon import authorization dated September 2018, signed by a sitting minister, describing him as a defense advisor and authorizing the import of assault rifles and a pistol from Mali. Arrested, then released, allegedly on direct intervention from the Secretary General of the Presidency himself, Ferdinand Ngoh Ngoh. Version 2 of the same man from the man's own public record in France, a decorated former defense ministry official, NATO medal, and for serving in Afghanistan, founder of 3 successful security consulting firms, advisor on the Grand Palais renovation security in Paris. And this is the part that should make every Cameroonian sit up. Self-described coordinator of the liaison between Cameroonian presidency and the investigative Commission into the 2016 Ezekiel train disaster that killed over 80 of our compatriots. The same man, two irreconcilable biographies, one built entirely on his own press material, unverified from the outside, who authorized what and why remains in the captain's own words, dirty ground. About the accusation. So who does Effoudou say sat above all of this? He talked of Ferdinand Ngoh Ngoh, Secretary General of the Presidency since December 2011, 15 years in the same chair, longer than almost anyone in the same history of that office. Minister of State since January 2019, a man other analysts describe only half-joking as Cameroon's vice president in practice, if not in title. Effoudou's charge is direct, that Ngoh Ngoh weaponized the security apparatus for personal ambition, concealed coup plotting from the president, and in a separate, more explosive claim, is the man who ordered the assassination of journalist Martinez Zogo. These are serious, unproven allegations. I say that plainly because that is exactly what they are at this stage. Allegations from one witness with his own history and his own incentives. Not a verdict, but here is why serious people are not laughing this off. The motive Effoudou uh, describe a fight for control of the Directorate General of External Relations, Cameroon's External Intelligence Service, after its coordinator Leopold Maxi Eko felt out of favor, sits uneasily alongside a competing motive that has emerged inside the actual Martinez Zogo military tribunal, involving a separate financial dispute between witnesses. Two motives, one crime. The court has not resolved which one, if either, is true. The architecture of fear. Let me widen the lens, because this is not really a story about two men. It is a story about how Cameroon's security state is built. Unlike France, where the interior minister runs domestic policy, Cameroon stack nearly every intelligence function directly under the presidency. The Directorate General of External Relations for External Threats, the Directorate General for National Security for Domestic Threats, and the Territorial Intelligence, the National Security Council, the Presidential Military Cabinet, the Presidential Security, the Rapid Intervention Battalion, the Presidential Guards, five, six, sometimes seven parallel channels, all reporting in theory to one desk. In theory, but in practice, as this story shows, intelligence notes get intercepted, buried, or weaponized before they ever reach the president. We saw this exact pattern in the case that sent former Minister Ivo Mengu to prison for the Fundi affair. The reports that should have reached President Biya were quietly redirected onto a French newspaper. Investigation forced the issue into the open. This is the architecture of a court, not a state. Whoever controls the flow of information to an aging, increasingly absent head of states control the succession. That is the real price here. Not a gun, not a dead journalist, the pipeline to Effoudou. Why now? The timing is as important as the information. Always ask about the timing. Effoudou vanishes for 3 years after his 2024 dismissal, for then resurfaces now in the middle of a presidential absence stretching past 50 days in the same season as two other bombshells, a gold smuggling scandal draining an estimated 2,000 billion francs CFA from state coffers between 2021 and 2025, and a fresh round of accusation against Minister Usval Baboki over illicit enrichment. Coincidentally, perhaps, or a sign that everyone with a grievance and a camera has decided this is the moment to speak, because the man at the center of the state, President Biya himself, is simply not there to refrain. This is not new in Cameroon history. We have seen insider defectors before. police commissioner who fled into exile, and a published book on the inner working of the security services. Presidential confidants who fall from grace produce their own grim revelations. What is different this time is the rank, the specification of the document cited, and the fact that it lands directly on the decks of the second most powerful man in the country, Ferdinand Ngoh Ngoh. The succession question in Cameroon. Here is our own honest reading, and I ask you to sit with it rather than share it as fact. Cameroon is no longer fighting over policy. It, it is fighting over who inherits the chair. The stakes for Ngoh Ngoh specifically are existential. Analysts point out that officials who leave the presidency without securing uh, an equivalent seat of institutional power, a vice presidency, for instance, have historically found themselves stripped of protection and, in some cases, persecuted. If Ngoh Ngoh does not secure that vice presidential seat when the constitution does settle, he risks becoming the next cautionary tale. That is the mobile. That is the motive. Analysts keep circling back to, regardless of which specific crime you are examining. Martinez Zogo, the gun in the garden, the disputed decree, the gold, different files, same underlying war, who succeeds, and an 80-something president who has now been away from the country for not less than 50 days. Some are talking of 7 to 8 weeks. What we don't know. Let me be the mayor who tells you what nobody wants to say on camera. We do not have independent confirmation of most of Effoudo's specific claim. We do not have the original weapons import documents verified by an independent body. We do not have judicial confirmation that Ngoh Ngoh ordered anything. We have one exile officer's testimony, a set of documents whose authenticity has not been established clearly outside his own account, and a court case in which a completely different motive is currently being argued. That is nothing, but it is not a verdict either. Anyone telling you today with certainty exactly who killed Martinez Zogo and why is telling you a conclusion the tribunal itself has not reached. So where does that leave us as citizens? With a state where intelligence has become a weapon of succession rather than a shield for the nation, with a president absent, a chair being circled, and men who once served in the shadow now speaking into microphone because the shadow no longer feels safe. Whatever the truth of Effoudo's specific claims, the pattern he described, information hardened, weaponized, and redirected around an absent head of state, is one Cameroonians have seen before and will likely see again until country has a real transparent rule of law governing how power changes hands. That is the actual scandal, not one of Captain, not one Secretary General. The absence of any lawful predictable process for what happened next is the underlying problem. This is Cyrille le Maire. Stay sharp, stay skeptical of easy answers on all sides, and I will see you at the next session of our talk, hot talk.